Hi everyone, I'm Karen, and I'm going to talk to you about big data. Does that make you excited?
Yes.
Okay, so the trick is I'm really not going to talk to you about big data, but it's a good buzzword. But I'm going to talk to you about data lakes. Does that make you more excited? Does anyone know the difference between a data lake and a big data? Anyway, so sorry, these must be auto-admin. Yeah. So everyone knows the 3 V's of big data: velocity, variety, volume, right? Well, I'm here to tell you there's a new V, and it's the fact that data is weird. That only really works if you're German. So data is weird because people are weird. And people are weird. Did you know that? You kind of knew that. We knew that in Austin, right? Because keep Austin weird. So innovation's weird, but that's what we like about innovation. And I'm really into data. So I don't know if you guys read about this in the news a while ago. A guy got caught on video taking a leak in a reservoir. See this reservoir for containing runoff data somewhere in Oregon? So what do you think they had to do? Because a guy put 16 ounces of mostly safe to drink urine into a reservoir that had 8 million gallons of water in it. What do you think happened? They drained it. It says right there in the headline. 8 million gallons of water that were kept in reserve, that's why it's a reservoir, for the people of Oregon. And that cost them $34,000 to do that. Makes sense, right? What's the problem with this? Well, the problem with this is that's a reservoir. There are birds in there, there are frogs in there, and frogs and birds and turtles and snakes and bugs. They're all doing what they normally do. But they said that the commandment of the Water Bureau is to provide clean, cold, and constant water to customers. So they were committed to water quality, just like most of us in the world are committed to data quality. But we know that data is weird because people are weird. And because people lie. Did you know that? People lie. So in 1987, 7 million children disappeared off the face of the earth. Did you read about that in the news? You did? You've seen this before. You'd think that would have made the news, that on one day in April, 7 million dependents disappeared off the face of the earth. And that was because the IRS started requiring filings for Social Security numbers for dependents who were 5 years old or older. What had been happening in the years before 1987 that every deduction got you $1,900 US in 1987? What were people doing?
Bunch of kids. Fake kids.
How hard was it to invent a kid on your IRS tax return in 1987? You just filled in line, whatever it was, line 32. How many dependents?
I was 10. I don't know.
There were probably 2 of you. I hate to tell you this. There may have been 3.
I'll have to ask my dad.
Right? Yeah. So in 1987, 7 million children disappeared off the face of the earth, literally on April 15th, right? That cost the US revenue $2.8 billion over the lifetime of this deduction. Now, to put that in context, the entire NASA budget for a year in the US now is a little over $17 billion. So we let $2.8 billion go out of the revenue because people lie. I mean, maybe they miscalculated or miscounted their children, or maybe it just felt like they had 8 children in their house, or maybe there's a multiplier for having preteens and teenagers. I don't know. Well, the other thing that happened is then 2 years later, in 1989, the deduction went up to $2,000. And so you'd think revenue would grow, right? There'd be more children, more dependents, more. No, because now you were required to have a Social Security number for children 2 years or older. So what happened was, yes, people will lie when it's just a number in a math problem. As soon as you have to file documents to invent data, right? So one of the benefits in data quality is to make the process verifiable. That causes people not to lie so much. So speaking of lying, I lie. Anyone know what this number is? People who haven't seen this before? What does it look like? It's a zip code. Anyone know where it is? You know, you can kind of tell from the first couple of digits. It's from Hell, Michigan. So when me, a nice Canadian girl, that's kind of redundant, in Canada, goes to your website and is trying to send you money, and you have this nice little box that says postal code, and I type in M1G1B2 because that's my postal code, and some great UI designer has said, oh, wait, postal codes are only numbers, and it won't take my postal code. I put in 481, like in the, you know, Canadians put in 90210, 99999, 00000, you know, but Hell, Michigan is where I really want you to go when you turn my beautiful postal code into all numbers. Anyone know what this is?
North Pole.
Yeah, it's a postal code for the North Pole. So the other lie that customers tell, where are you asked most for your zip code or postal code? Where are some places? Besides a form and besides Amazon when you're there late at night buying stuff that you can't.
Gas pump.
The gas pump, well, see, that has to match your address. I know that because I can't buy gas at a gas pump because I have letters and there's no letters on those keypads. Yep.
A lot of stores want to collect your zip code whenever you're checking out so they can match whether you are a local customer
Bingo.
or someone far away.
So retailers, banks, anything that has a physical presence will ask you. You know, in the olden days, it was Radio Shack asking for your address and your phone number, and everyone lied, and you had all these addresses memorized. This, when I go to a retailer, when they tell me, no, you have to give one, this is what happens to retailer data. You either give H0H, 0H0, and they happily take it because it is a valid Canadian postal code because that's where you send your letters to Santa. It's even printed on some mailboxes. But they use it to see how far you came to shop at this store so they can understand foot traffic and drive traffic and everything. The other most common number, though, is that when people require a customer to give that, is the person working the cash, they're not going to fight you over it. They're not going to ask you, so what are they going to put in when you say no?
Their own.
Their own, or better, because they get caught at that, they put in the store's postal code. So then you get all this wonderful data that shows that 99% of the people who shop at your store actually live above it, right? So we've collected all this data, and we've done this data quality thing by making it mandatory. We want good data. We want a good sample size, and what we end up with is a lot of lies. So you guys have heard of people that fib when they fill out forms, right? Yeah? You got any favorite fibs that you put in? Other than, now if you're ordering something.
New ones now.
Yeah, you got some new ones.
No, I just meant that's
Like used to put in Sussex Drive, like where our prime minister lives and everything, yeah.
There used to be, a long time ago, when the grocery store frequent buyers things came, a pen pal club you could get into where you actually swapped cards with somebody who was completely different than you. So I was in the deep south with 2 kids, and I'd swap with a single
Oh.
person in the city. Just totally screw with
Just to mess with them, right? So my husband and I do that. So I'm vegetarian, he's not. And we used to have this rule that on my loyalty card, no meat could go on that because I wanted to build my hippie vegetarian profile in the loyalty thing. Now the other problem is, anyone ever bought a toy on Amazon? Ever? Or kids clothing? Do you notice that all your recommendations for the next 30 years are for kids' toys? And see, I'm child free, so I made the mistake of ordering something once. And now I sit there, no, I do not like this, I do not like this, I do not like. I guess there's a high profit margin in people buying kids gifts at the last minute. I have no idea why. So here's another one. You guys know what nulls are? Nulls are part of database design. It's unknown. It means a couple of things. It's a very contentious database design thing, whether you should love them or hate them. I believe in good data quality, so I love them. It says, we don't have this data item. So here's the story. My father, who's Hispanic, went to get his first Social Security card. He has no middle name. We don't give people middle names. We collect a lot of names later, but at the time of birth, you don't have this concept of middle name. And so he didn't fill it out, and the woman said, you have to fill this out. So he put on there, none. So now we call him None, because that's how you say none in Spanish. I have a friend who is manager of database administrators at a very large cloud services company, and she was born in Indonesia. Indonesians are not given family or last names when they're born. And when she moved to the US, she found out that she could not be a person in the US because we build systems according to the worldview that we have. So yeah, some people realize that people don't have middle names. Most people in the US who are designing systems have no clue that people have no last name, no middle name, no first names. There are cultures where people aren't given a first name until they're 8 years old. And then we add in the whole thing of you could have a middle name, but maybe the customer didn't give it. And so people want to give it null or require one to put in there. And so we have, in hospitals and in criminal things, we have Jane Does and John Does, but heaven forbid if your real name is Jane Doe or John Doe, or that your name is null, which is a valid name. Did you have a comment?
My friend in Australia is a fellow journalist. His name is still Garian. He has a mononym.
Yep.
Legal name, it's
Yep.
name, and he has had all kinds of fights with people like Google.
Yep, the real names policies, yeah.
Well, it's not a real name. It's like, yeah, it totally is. It's my legal name.
Right.
Bugger off.
And we have people who change their names just to mess with the systems, like little Bobby Tables and drop table, and all of that. Well, so I'm telling you that data is weird. Anyone know what ISO 3166 is? You don't have your standards memorized? Oh my gosh, you must be technical people. ISO 3166 is the valid list of country names. You must have seen it in a drop-down somewhere. Perfect. Someone's designing a database. You want good data, right? So you put 3166, you plop it in there. The problem with 3166 is it's only a list of the current recognized country names. So if you were born in Czechoslovakia, your country is not on that list. So if you're asking customers, where were you born? Or where did you first buy from us? It's not going to be on the list. So I don't know if any of you are experienced enough to remember before we had those nice, clean state codes. So here's the other problem with data lakes, is they say we just throw all of our data in the data lake, let people do it. Well, if you got experienced data, like data that's as old as I am, your data is going to look like that. It's not going to say IN and OH and CA and all that stuff. Plus, there are many standards for things like state. So here's the ISO 3166. Here's what you would see according to the US Postal Service and some other postal services. I forget what these others are. And one of the things you'll notice is sometimes they're spelled differently. Sometimes they're shared, right? So CA is the US state name for California, but it's also the country code for Canada, just so you know. And then we have this problem of, well, we don't worry about things changing. Well, Canada is one of those places that we had a territory. We had the Northwest Territory split off and become 2 territories. And that caused, practically a Y2K problem for us in Canada. And I bet you most US systems didn't make any changes because, Canada is like the 51st state anyway.
That's Puerto Rico.
Yeah. Anyone know what this is? This is the Gimli glider. The Gimli glider was an Air Canada 767 that ran out of fuel, and it was intending to fly from Montreal to Edmonton or something like that. And it got over it got over Manitoba, and first one engine went out. So they're like, okay, we're going to divert to Winnipeg, find out what's going on. Then the other engine went out, and then there was a loud bong sound that neither of the pilots had ever heard before, because there were no training simulations for a plane completely running out of fuel. Why did it run out of fuel? We were in the midst of converting to the metric system and it was loaded. So aviation fuel is loaded by weight, not by volume, because temperature and pressure impacts that. And the onboard computer had failed when it went to refuel in Montreal. And so they had to manually do the calculations. So the guy did the calculations, and he did it both ways, whatever that means, and came up with a number. Then they also have to do a test. They do a manual test now when the computer doesn't work. And the guy who did the manual test didn't have to do the calculations. So what we had was a failure of units of measure, a failure of math, and a failure of the crew to double check the data when your normal protective systems are out. And so it had to land. The pilot was a former military guy, as most commercial aviation pilots are. So he landed at the Gimli former Air Force Base. But what he didn't know is there was kart racing, this racing going on. He thought he was landing on an old abandoned landing strip, and it had to glide. He was a glider pilot as well. This was the good thing. So he was able to glide it, but when they went to land, there were all these people. And there's another iconic photo of two kids on a bike trying to ride it out, right? But no one got hurt. And actually, they put this plane back into service, and it's now being chopped up in parts, and you can buy a key tag for it.
The beginning of your travel?
Yes, the Karen's Travel Stories, yeah. So here's another nice thing. Here's the US State Department mailing me a passport card, and they had to, you can't tell from this, but it's a sticker, Care of Canada. This is the part of the US government that handles foreign affairs. And they had to put a sticker on it. Here's the Association for Information Technology Professionals. They actually tried to write on the cellophane window my address because they couldn't put Canada on it. So my big thing is you don't have to do business in a foreign country to have foreign data, and I pay the price for that. We're going to skip over this one. Anyone else have any funny characters in their names? Apostrophes, spaces, underscores. A friend of mine cannot remember where the accent goes, so he does this. So how do you handle that, right? A certain database design. You have to say either you allow certain extended characters. Now, the accent over the O is actually covered by some collations and some setups in databases. But the real way you deal with it is you deal with extended character sets because people actually have names that are spelled funny. But here's what happens. What does that say? Anyone speak escape? What? L, escape, tilde, super Pez. Are you getting the hint? Oops, sorry. This says Lopez. Can you not read it? This happens because your data was fine, and then you sent it over the inner tubes to business partners who did some stuff to the data, who then sent it on to a printing server that didn't handle this stuff, and it still got there. Because data is weird. Just a couple more minutes. So I have this ongoing problem. I actually have a spy name, Karina, because Expedia, United, and Air Canada can't share my first name and one of my middle initials back. So this didn't used to be a problem until your boarding pass name had to match your passport name. And at one point, an airline person told me I should go get my passport changed. It would be easier. Now, here's the really interesting thing. The really interesting thing is TSA has never cared that my name is spelled Karen MMS, Lopez K, or Karina. They don't care. It's only the airlines and their computers. So I can't use mobile check-in. I can't use the kiosks. I always have to go talk to a person. And I can't fix it because it's in the integration layer. It has nothing to do with me. One more thing. Here we got some data. Isn't it pretty? It's got colors. But there's this big batch of data missing. Anyone know why? During Katrina, entire sensors went out. And so there's nothing in the data set, nothing at all. But people are still averaging and doing average temperatures and average humidity and average rainfall against all that missing data, because they have error correction for an individual sensor, but not for whole blocks of them going out. So we have that data quality. So systems lie. Someone asked me how do they send me a message on Twitter, so I told them @DataChick, and they mailed me a package. Everyone have a Starbucks name? You all have Starbucks names, right? That's not your real name? Who has one? What is it? Piper? Mine's Kitty. Here's all the ways it gets spelled. Kenny, Kitty, Kitty, Kenny. Kenny, my twin brother's name. Think about all the verbal data that's in your business processes, and what are the chances of the data quality of that being anything at all? Because people are weird, and people lie, and systems lie, because we want data quality. And the Water Bureau said, remember, we want to provide clean, cold, and constant water to its customers. So it cleans up after a guy who took a leak in, a reservoir. Sounds good. And then 2 years later, another guy got caught taking a leak in a much bigger reservoir, 38 million gallons of water, but they set the standard. And so what did they have to do? They had to drain it again. Only this impacted a lot more water, 38 million gallons, because they'd made this commitment to their data lake of water. Because someone will always be pissing in your data lake. And if your systems and your processes and your end users don't understand that your data quality has all these ways it can go wrong, then you're always going to look like someone pissed in your data lake, because all these things happen. But if you want your data to be simple, go out and make the world simple and come back to me. Thank you very much.